Hi, I'm Leora, and 2 years ago, at 3 a.m., my pregnant sister showed up at my door, soaked in rain, shaking, barely able to speak. Our parents had kicked her out to protect their perfect image. Then they texted me, "Don't help her. She had no one." So I let her in. And now, 2 years later, my father has the nerve to ask, "Is the baby okay?" I said one sentence, just one. But maybe what hurts most isn't what they did to her. It's what they expected me to do, too. Why would a family treat their daughters like strangers? And what was that one sentence I finally sent back? Do you want to know? It was the kind of sound that pulls you out of sleep before your mind has even caught up. 3 hard knocks, then 3 more, each one sharper than the last. My apartment was dark except for the faint glow from the streetlight outside, blurred by the rain hitting my window in steady sheets. For a moment, I thought I'd dreamt it. Then came another set of knocks, urgent, uneven. Whoever it was, they weren't going away. I pushed the blanket aside and swung my legs over the side of the bed, my heart already beating faster. It was late fall in Charleston, and the air inside was cold enough that my breath puffed faintly in front of me. I slipped on a sweatshirt and padded to the door, trying not to imagine the worst. When I peered through the peephole, my stomach dropped. Maylise. Her hood was down, hair plastered to her cheeks, mascara smudged in jagged lines. The thin sweatshirt clung to her, soaked through, and under it I could see the undeniable curve of a baby bump. She was shivering so hard her teeth chattered, and when I cracked the door open, the wind pushed the rain in like a warning. "Leora!" Her voice cracked on my name, the sound raw and small. I pulled her inside before she could say anything else. The door banged shut behind her, but not before the night's cold bit into my skin. She stood in the middle of my living room, dripping water onto the hardwood, looking like she'd been dropped here from another world. I reached for the throw blanket draped over the couch and wrapped it around her shoulders. Her hands gripped it like it was the only solid thing left. And then my phone buzzed. It was face down on the counter, screen lighting up in short, sharp bursts. I picked it up, thumb hovering over the button before I even looked. The message preview was enough. From Seraphine. "If you shelter her, you're no better than her. Don't come back." It was like reading something written in ice. My fingers tightened around the phone until my knuckles went white. That wasn't just a command. That was a sentence. Exile, delivered in 12 words. Maylis's eyes flicked to the phone. She didn't have to ask who it was from. "She knows you're here?" I asked quietly, more to myself than to her. "She kicked me out." Her lips barely moved. "Said I had until midnight to decide. End it or leave." She swallowed hard, the movement almost painful to watch. I left. I glanced toward the window. Rain streaked the glass in relentless lines, the storm outside somehow gentler than the one inside me. In my mind, I was back at that long dining table, years of family dinners where the unspoken rule was simple: protect the image. Don't bring trouble home. Don't give people a reason to talk. In our house, love was conditional. You could feel it in the way conversations paused when you walked into the room, in the way Seraphine's smile could harden in an instant if you said the wrong thing. Now she'd turned that weapon on Maylis, and if I opened my door to her, she'd turn it on me too. My phone buzzed again. Another message. I didn't open it. Instead, I set it face down on the counter and went back to Maylis. She was sitting on the edge of the couch now, the blanket pooled around her like it was too heavy to lift. "Come on," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Let's get you warm." I guided her into the kitchen, where the hum of the refrigerator was the only sound besides the rain. I filled the kettle and set it on the stove, the click of the burner strangely loud in the quiet. "You're not going to read it?" she asked after a moment, her voice muffled by the blanket. "No." I opened the cabinet and reached for the tea tin. "If she wants to talk to me, she can come here herself." Maylis's eyes searched mine, as if trying to measure how much I meant it. I didn't flinch. When the kettle whistled, I poured the water into 2 mugs, the steam curling into the cold air between us. She took hers with both hands, the heat soaking into her fingers. "Leora," She hesitated, eyes glistening. You don't have to. Yes, I said before she could finish. I do. For a long moment, the only sound was the rain against the windows. She stared down into her mug, and I let her have the space. Sometimes you don't need answers right away, you just need to know someone isn't going to walk away. I could feel the vibration of my phone from across the room, another message waiting like a stone in my pocket. But I didn't move. If they wanted me to choose, I'd already chosen. She leaned back against the couch, shoulders finally dropping a little. The blanket slid off one side, and I tucked it back around her. Outside, the rain softened, but the sky was still heavy with clouds. Inside, the air had shifted. Not warm, not yet, but different. Like we'd stepped over a line there was no coming back from. Melis's breathing slowed. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "You don't know the whole story yet." I met her eyes. "Then tell me everything." Her voice came out so low I had to lean in to catch it. The rain outside was softer now, but it still filled the room with its steady tapping, like it was marking the seconds before she said what she'd been holding back. I could see her hands tighten around the mug I'd given her, steam curling up into her face and vanishing. "It started 3 nights ago," she murmured, eyes fixed on a point just past my shoulder. I knew she'd be angry, but I didn't think. She trailed off and swallowed hard. I stayed quiet. If I pushed, she might shut down. If I waited, I'd get the whole truth. She asked me to come to the living room. Melis began again. Dad was there too. She had a glass of wine in her hand, not even pretending it was just to unwind. She didn't waste any time. She told me I had 2 options: end the pregnancy or pack my things and be gone by midnight. Her fingers twitched under the blanket. She didn't raise her voice. That made it worse. Like it was just business. Like my life, my baby, was an inconvenience on her calendar. I pictured the scene too easily. Seraphine in that silk robe she wore when she wanted to feel in control. The wine glass balanced like an accessory. Her tone calm enough to make you question your own reaction. That was her skill, making cruelty sound reasonable. What did Dad say? I asked. Her laugh was humorless. Nothing. He just sat there. He looked at me once, then back at the fireplace like I wasn't even part of the conversation. She shook her head. You know what she said after that? She told me, if you keep it, don't expect us to be your safety net. Like I've ever asked them for anything. I could almost smell the sharp tang of that wine, see the way Seraphine would have crossed her legs, a physical full stop to any discussion. The way Dad's silence always made him her accomplice without him lifting a finger. Did you try to reason with her? I asked, already knowing the answer. I told her I loved him, that I wanted this baby. She laughed, not like she found it funny, more like I'd said something naive. Then she stood up, went to the hall closet, and came back with my duffel bag. It was already packed. I frowned. She'd packed it before she even talked to you? She had. Melis's eyes dropped to the blanket again. When I walked outside with it, she followed me to the porch. She threw something onto the lawn. It was the family photo from last Christmas, the one with all of us in front of the tree. But my part of the picture was torn out, just gone. I pictured that glossy print, the jagged white edge where her face should have been. My stomach tightened. It was raining, she went on. I picked it up and the paper was already curling in the wet grass. She didn't say goodbye. She just turned and shut the door. The image burned into me. My sister standing in the cold, holding a ripped picture while our mother closed the door on her. I'd grown up knowing Seraphine could be brutal, but this was calculated. Where did you go? I asked. I started walking. I didn't even think about where. I just knew I couldn't go to anyone she knew. I made it to the bus stop by the library, sat there until I couldn't feel my toes. I thought about calling you, but I knew she'd try to get to you first. She was right. The fact that Seraphine's message had arrived before Melis even finished knocking proved it. I got up and went to my bedroom without saying a word. When I came back, I had the small velvet box I kept on the top shelf of my dresser. Melis's brows knit together when I handed it to her. Open it." She lifted the lid and gasped softly. Inside was a delicate gold necklace with a small, worn locket. "This was Grandma Elsie's," she whispered. "She gave it to me when I turned 18, I said. "Told me it had been in the family for 3 generations. I want you to have it now." Her eyes flicked up to mine. "Leora, I can't." "Yes, you can. This stays in the family we choose, not the one that throws us out when we don't fit the picture." She clasped the necklace in her hand like it might disappear if she let go. For a moment, the lines in her face softened. I could see the teenager she'd been, the little sister who used to follow me around in the garden. The quiet stretched, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was solid. Then, the sharp buzz of my phone on the table broke it. I turned my head toward the sound. The screen lit up, Seraphine's name clear even from here. I didn't touch it, not yet. Malis glanced at me. "Aren't you going to see what she wants?" I shook my head slowly, my jaw tightening. "No, she's already said enough." The phone buzzed again. The rain outside had slowed to a drizzle, the sky just beginning to pale with the first hint of dawn. But inside, the air was thick with everything we hadn't yet said. I didn't open the message right away. Instead, I sat there on the edge of the sofa, staring at the soft glow of the screen, watching my mother's name pulse like a heartbeat. I wasn't afraid. I was tired. Tired of the games, the guilt trips, the manipulation dressed up in manners. But I also knew better than to assume her silence had meant surrender. If Seraphine hadn't stormed in with a monologue and a wine glass, then she was planning something quieter, more strategic. Eventually, I picked up the phone and tapped the screen. The message was brief. "Consider this your last warning. No warmth, no punctuation, just that. No love, Mom. No hope she's okay. Nothing to even hint at remorse or softness. Just a sentence that felt like it had been stamped in ice. I deleted it without replying, but it sat in the back of my mind like a ticking clock. The next few days passed in that strange limbo that settles over a household after a storm. Malis slept a lot. Her body was still tense, and I could tell she wasn't used to being somewhere she didn't have to flinch. She took long showers and folded her clothes more than once, like neatness might restore her control. I went back to work at the bookstore, part-time mostly, because I didn't want to leave her alone too long. I told my manager the truth, or at least a version of it that didn't involve torn photographs and ultimatums. She didn't ask questions, just told me to do what I needed to do. That was the thing about working with women in their 50s. They'd seen enough to know when someone was holding things together with string. We slipped into a rhythm. We didn't talk much about the baby. I think she needed to feel like a person again before she could feel like a mother, but the silence outside our apartment was deceptive. The first real sign came the following Friday. I was walking back from the mailbox when I noticed 2 red envelopes in our neighbors' boxes. Fancy calligraphy, holiday invitations. The Kincaid family was famous in Charleston for their Christmas parties. It was practically a neighborhood tradition. I didn't expect to get one, but what I didn't expect was the woman across the hall, Mrs. Denton, stopping me in the hallway. "Your mom's Christmas party," she said brightly, holding up the envelope. "I didn't see your name on the list. Oversight, I'm sure." She smiled, the kind of smile that's meant to be kind, but lands like a paper cut. I smiled back. Tight, short. "I don't think we'll be attending," I said simply. Mrs. Denton tilted her head, her tone dropping just enough to make it personal. "Well, I hope everything's all right. Your mother, she said you'd been under a lot of stress lately." Of course she did. By the time I got back into the apartment, my hands were shaking. I wasn't angry, not yet. It was more like that slow, creeping cold that seeps in before a storm. Malis was on the couch, a book in her lap, but her eyes were distant. "You okay?" I asked. She nodded, but when she looked up, I could see she already knew. A few days later, we went to the Saturday farmers market. We needed groceries, and I thought a walk might do her good. The morning air was crisp, the market stalls busy with neighbors and strangers alike. The kind of normalcy I thought might buffer us from the whispers. We were standing by the produce stand when it happened. Malis had picked up a bag of oranges, smiling faintly, when a voice cut through the crowd. Well, well, isn't this sweet? It was a woman I vaguely recognized, someone who used to volunteer at church bake sales. She wore oversized sunglasses and a smirk that didn't reach her eyes. The charity case is doing her own shopping now, she said, loud enough that 3 heads turned. Malis froze. The oranges slipped from her hands and rolled across the table. She looked down, cheeks flushed. I stepped in without thinking. Not angry, just precise. We're not here for handouts, I said calmly. But if you're handing out shame, maybe save some for the woman who tossed her pregnant daughter into a storm. The woman's lips parted, as if she'd expected us to stay quiet, to be small. I took Malis's arm and led her away before she could hear the rest. We left the basket behind. Neither of us spoke until we got back into the car. Malis looked out the window. I kept my hands on the wheel longer than necessary before I started the engine. She's poisoning people, I finally said. Not just us, everyone she can reach. Malis didn't respond, but she reached for the seatbelt with trembling fingers. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the floor of the living room, the lights off, just watching the hallway shadows shift with the glow from the street. Every memory I had of Seraphine was colored now, rewritten with this new layer of calculation. The way she could craft a lie with a smile, dress a wound with a headline. She didn't need to scream, she just needed people to believe she was the victim. And they did, because she was charming. She knew how to say just enough truth to make the rest sound credible. She'd always said, the trick isn't being right, it's being respected. I stared at my phone for a long time. I thought about calling her, about asking what exactly she thought she was doing, but I knew better. She wouldn't yell, she'd sigh. Say something like, "You've always been so dramatic, Leora," or worse, "This is what happens when you let emotion drive your choices." I closed my eyes and thought of the way Malis looked at that torn photo, the way she hadn't even cried, just stood in the rain holding that piece of her past like it might reattach itself if she was still enough. That's when I knew. If Seraphine wanted a war, I wasn't going to play defense anymore. She wanted a fight in public. She was going to get one. But on my terms, by Monday, I had a plan. I didn't spell it out to Malis, not because I didn't trust her, but because I needed her to rest, to believe there was still some peace in the world that wasn't poisoned by our mother's reach. But inside, I was done waiting, done hoping Seraphine would stop at subtle slights and whispers. She wanted to paint a picture. Fine, I'd bring the frame. It was early evening. I'd just put water on the stove for pasta and was slicing a tomato when I heard a car door close outside. My apartment faces the street, but I kept the blinds down most of the time, especially since the incident at the market. Malis was in her room, earbuds in, watching a documentary. I wiped my hands on a towel and peeked through the window. The Lexus parked across the street wasn't unfamiliar. Neither was the woman stepping out of it in low heels, a cream wool coat, and a purse that probably cost more than my rent. She hadn't changed, not her walk, not the way she paused to glance up at my window like she already knew I was watching. Seraphine. She didn't ring the doorbell right away. Instead, she stood outside the door for a few seconds. Maybe she expected I'd come out to meet her, like a dutiful daughter called home. When that didn't happen, she knocked, 3 sharp taps, not frantic, not hesitant, just deliberate. I didn't answer immediately. I turned the stove off, wiped the knife, and set the tomatoes aside. Then I walked to the door and opened it. But I didn't open it all the way. "Hello, Leora," she said with that thin, tight-lipped smile that used to pass as warmth. I didn't return the smile. "You're not invited." She raised one eyebrow. "Is that how we speak to our mothers now? Is that how mothers treat their daughters?" I shot back. Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes cooled. "May I come in?" "No." There was a pause. Brief, but pregnant with history. She tilted her head and gave a light chuckle, as if amused by a child's defiance. "Very well, I won't stay long. I just came to talk. You've been talking plenty, just not to me." She ignored that. "I've spoken to someone at a private agency. A good one, discreet. They help girls like Malis find stable homes for their children." I stared at her. My fingers tightened on the edge of the door. "You're here to pitch adoption?" She softened her voice, the way she always did when trying to manipulate. "I'm trying to offer her a future. The baby, too." "Do you think this is sustainable? Working part-time, living in a two-bedroom apartment, watching her life fall apart before it's even begun?" "You mean the life you threw her out of?" My voice was low, but it cut. "You packed her bag and tossed her picture in the yard. You made your choice, and now you want to pretend you're the rescue team?" Seraphine's expression didn't flicker. That was the thing about her. She didn't crack. She pivoted. "She made her choice, Leora. Actions have consequences. I'm trying to help her live with them." "No," I said. "You're trying to rewrite them." I could see it. The story she wanted to spin. That the poor, misguided daughter had made a mistake, and the noble family had found a solution. That this was all just a bump in the road to their next Christmas card. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. "If she agrees, the agency will cover medical expenses and provide a stipend." "It's not too late to make the right decision." My laugh was short, dry. "The right decision? According to whom?" "According to what's best for everyone." "No," I said again, firmer. "Not everyone. Just you, your reputation, your curated life." I stepped forward, not opening the door farther, but enough for my voice to land like a stone. The only mistake was expecting me to act like a mother. She blinked, just once, but it was enough. Enough to show she'd underestimated me. Again. Then I shut the door. I leaned against it, breathing slow and deep. Behind me, I heard Melis's door creak open. "Was that her?" she asked quietly. I turned. "Yeah." What did she want? I looked at the envelope still sitting on the floor where Seraphine had dropped it. "To fix her image." Melis walked over, picked it up, and without even looking inside, tore it in half. "Let her deal with her own reflection." We sat in silence for a while after that. The kettle on the stove started to hiss, but I didn't move. Eventually, Melis stood and turned it off. When she came back, she had 2 cups of tea. She handed me one, and we drank it like we used to when we were kids, sneaking chamomile and whispering secrets past bedtime. That night, the house felt quieter, not in the way of loneliness, but of settled dust. Until my phone buzzed again. I looked at the screen. A text, not from Seraphine. It was from Vera, our cousin, close to Seraphine, always her favorite. She had a way of playing both sides, but never risking her place at the top. "Can we talk? It's about Melis." I didn't answer, not yet, but I had a feeling Seraphine wasn't done. She'd never been the kind to accept a door slammed in her face, not without finding a window to crawl through. After shutting the door in Seraphine's face, I gave myself a few minutes to breathe, then made myself a cup of coffee I never drank. I just needed something to hold, something warm that wouldn't lie to me. Melis stayed quiet most of the evening, and I let her. We watched an old episode of The Golden Girls just to hear women talk about something other than betrayal. But even Dorothy's sarcasm couldn't drown out the unease settling into my bones. I knew my mother. That offer at the door was just the first card in a deck she'd been shuffling long before she ever knocked. I didn't expect Vera to show up that same week. She called first. Not unusual, not alarming. Vera and I had never been close, but she'd always played the role of the polite cousin. The one who never rocked the boat, never picked sides too loudly. So when she asked if she could drop by to bring some things for the baby, I agreed. Melis needed to feel like someone in the family still saw her as more than a cautionary tale. She came the next afternoon, a Thursday. Clear skies. Melis had finally let me take her to a prenatal checkup 2 days earlier, and we were both pretending things were calmer than they really were. She was folding baby clothes in the living room when Vera rang the bell. She brought a canvas bag full of diapers, onesies, a swaddle blanket, brand new, price tag still dangling. It all felt so curated. "You didn't have to," Melis said softly, genuinely touched. Vera gave her that signature half-smile. "Of course I did. We're family." She sat down across from her, legs crossed like she had all the time in the world. I watched from the kitchen doorway, arms folded. I wasn't rude. I wasn't warm either. "So, Vera said, turning her attention fully to Melis. How are you really doing? Melis hesitated, then gave the same answer I would have given at her age. I'm okay, just trying to get things in order. That's a lot for someone your age, Vera replied, not unkindly, but I admire your strength, I do. And then she pulled a manila folder from her purse. The sight of it sent a small jolt through my stomach. Nothing innocent ever came in those things. I spoke with someone I know, Vera began, her voice gentle. A lawyer who works with families in unique situations. She handles private adoptions. Quiet, clean, no red tape, no court drama. Melis blinked. I'm sorry, what? It's not what you think, Vera said quickly. There's no pressure. I just wanted you to have the information. You don't have to decide now, but life doesn't get easier, sweetheart, and this could be a way to make sure the baby has every opportunity. I stepped into the room, calm, controlled. You need to leave. Vera looked up, all innocent surprise. Liora, No. You came here under the pretense of support. I gestured at the folder, the expensive baby gifts. This is manipulation in a gift bag, and I'm not letting it happen under my roof. Melis looked like someone had knocked the breath from her lungs. You were working with them? Vera's expression hardened just a touch. I'm not working with anyone. I care. And frankly, you don't know what you're walking into. I know enough, I said, and I know who I don't want near my family. She left without another word. I watched from the window as she called someone on her cell before driving off. Her face didn't move, but her posture screamed agitation. Later that evening, while Melis was in the shower, I stepped outside onto the back porch with a blanket and tried to decompress. I was scrolling through my phone, mostly ignoring texts, when I overheard a voice from the open kitchen window. It was Eris. Her voice, at least, soft but familiar. I'd forgotten I hadn't closed the Bluetooth connection on the kitchen speaker, which had automatically connected to her phone earlier when she came by to drop off soup for Melis. I wouldn't have listened. But her words stopped me cold. She's still there. Yeah, both of them. No, she hasn't talked to a lawyer, I don't think. It's not like she has a plan. She's just playing hero. My stomach dropped. She's emotional, Seraphine, not thinking straight. You know how she gets. I closed the porch door quietly and walked back in. The call ended seconds before I entered the kitchen, but Eris didn't look surprised to see me. You needed something? She asked, like we hadn't just crossed the line between friend and spy. Who are you talking to? I asked, voice steady. She gave me a shrug, casual. Just someone who cares about you. You mean my mother? I mean someone trying to fix this mess. That's rich, I said, considering she created it. Eris sighed and set her mug down. You're letting your emotions control everything, Liora. Maybe if you stopped for 1 second and looked at this rationally. No, I cut in. Don't patronize me. Don't spin this like you're doing me a favor. You passed private information to the woman who threw her pregnant daughter out in the rain. She deserves to know what's going on, Eris snapped, finally letting the mask slip. She's still their mother. She forfeited that title when she weaponized everyone around her to isolate us, I said. Her expression didn't soften. You're too close to see what this is doing to your future. You're sinking, and you don't even know it. I'd rather sink than let someone like you throw me a rope. She left with that fake dignity people wear when they've been caught, but refused to admit it. I didn't tell Melis that night. She'd had enough betrayal for one day. Instead, I poured myself a glass of water and stood in the hallway long after the lights were off, the quiet ringing louder than any scream. By morning, I'd changed every password, locked down all my accounts, and started researching lawyers who specialized in emergency guardianship protections. I wasn't taking any more chances. Late that night, as I closed the curtains and checked the locks for the second time, my phone buzzed again. No name, no number, just one message. If you won't cooperate, you'll be forced to. The text burned into the back of my mind for days. I'd read it just once. If you won't cooperate, you'll be forced to. Then deleted it. But I didn't need the screen to remember the words. They rang in my ears every time I looked at Melis, every time I heard the baby kick from the other side of the apartment, every time I tried to sleep and couldn't. I didn't tell her about it. Not right away. I couldn't. She was already on edge, waking up some nights gasping like she'd just fallen from a great height. I'd find her in the kitchen at 3 a.m., hands cupped around a mug she never drank from. So instead of adding fuel to the fire, I quietly doubled the locks on the front door, installed a security camera I'd ordered online, and changed our wireless password. 3 days later, it happened. That morning had started off better than most. She'd woken up before me, made toast, even managed a small smile when I walked into the kitchen. She was wearing one of the oversized sweatshirts I'd given her, the one that said, "Not today, Satan," in faded lettering. We'd joked about it once. That felt like a lifetime ago. But something shifted around noon. She was on the couch, reading, when I noticed her holding her belly. Not in that tender way she usually did, but more like she was bracing herself. I asked if she was okay. She said yes. 20 minutes later, she was doubled over in the hallway, gripping the wall with white knuckles, tears streaking silently down her cheeks. We didn't wait. I grabbed her bag. I'd had it packed for weeks, just in case, helped her into the car, and drove through every yellow light between our apartment and St. Mary's Hospital. The nurses were kind, efficient. They ushered us into a room, hooked her up to monitors, and ran tests. The doctor came in shortly after, face calm, but voice serious. "Contractions are regular. You're not full term yet. We're going to do everything we can to keep labor from progressing, but we'll need to keep you here under observation." Malis looked at me, her eyes wide with panic. I took her hand. "You're not alone," I said. But inside, I was unraveling. I stepped out into the hallway while they prepped her room. My hands were shaking, my mind spinning with possibilities. What if she delivered too early? What if something went wrong? What if the stress, the threats, the pressure, it was all too much for her body to handle? And that's when I saw him. Alden, my father. He was standing at the end of the hall, near the vending machines, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on the floor like it held answers he couldn't bear to hear. I hadn't seen him since the night Malis showed up soaked on my doorstep. He hadn't called, hadn't written, nothing. I walked toward him slowly, every step heavy with confusion and memory. He looked up as I approached but didn't smile. "Who told you?" I asked. He shrugged. "Word gets around." That's convenient. He didn't rise to the bait. Instead, he sighed and looked down the hallway, toward the closed door where his pregnant daughter lay, hooked to monitors. "She should have thought this through," he said quietly. "It's not too late to fix this." My jaw clenched. Fix what? Her having a child, or her refusing to be ashamed of it? He met my eyes finally. "You're being reckless, Leora. You always have been, and now you're dragging her down with you." I took a breath, slow and cold. "Don't pretend you came here to help." He reached into his coat and pulled out a thin folder. "Hospital bills pile up fast." He placed it on the seat beside the vending machine and walked past me without another word. I waited until I heard the elevator ding, then walked over and opened the folder. There was no check, no letter, just a copy of the hospital estimate, and a note scribbled in his handwriting. She made her choice. That night, I sat alone in the waiting room, watching the clock as Maylou slept behind a glass wall. She was stable for now, but the nurses made it clear. She needed rest, zero stress, and a plan. I opened my wallet and took out the silver pen my father had given me at my college graduation. It had my initials engraved, along with a quote, "You have everything you need to write your future." I stared at it for a long time. The next morning, I drove to a pawn shop on the other side of town, one far enough away that no one would recognize me. I sold it. No bargaining, no sentimentality, just enough to cover the first wave of hospital costs. It wasn't just about the money, it was about cutting that last string, the one that still tied me to a version of him that never really existed. When I returned to the hospital, I handed the payment to the billing department and walked back to Malis's room with a quiet sense of resolve. She was sitting up in bed, pale but calm. Her eyes met mine, and something in them shifted when she saw my face. "Is everything okay?" she asked. I nodded. "I took care of it." She didn't ask how. She knew better than to dig right now. That night, after she drifted back to sleep, I stepped outside to get some air. The hospital courtyard was empty, except for a janitor mopping near the entrance. The streetlight above me flickered, humming softly. I pulled my coat tighter around me and looked up at the gray sky, wondering how many more fights I had left in me. And then I thought about that text, that threat. If you won't cooperate, you'll be forced to. I thought about Seraphine, about Vera, about Eris, and I said it aloud, quiet but certain. If they want to take her from me, they'll have to go through hell first. 2 weeks passed with an eerie kind of calm, the kind that always made me suspicious. Malis was back home, on bed rest, but she had that glow in her cheeks again, the one I hadn't seen since before the night she showed up at my door. Her strength was returning in small, quiet ways. She laughed more. She read again. She even helped me rearrange the nursery, mostly from the chair by the door, directing me like a construction forewoman with a clipboard and zero tolerance for uneven shelving. And for a while, it felt like maybe we were turning a corner. But when things get quiet around Seraphine, you can bet she's somewhere staging a scene. It was late on a Sunday when it happened. I was folding laundry in the living room when my phone buzzed. A message from my friend Hannah, with nothing but a screenshot attached. No text, no caption, just the image. It was a photo of the nursery, our nursery. The same one I'd painted over 3 days, picked out the curtains for, ordered the crib for. Same shelves, same plush giraffe in the corner, same lighting. But it had been posted on Seraphine's social media, captioned, "So grateful to finally see progress. A family is strongest when it pulls together." And the comments, "You've always been such a rock for your family. That baby is lucky to have a grandmother like you. It takes a village, and you built one, Seraphine." Not a single mention of me, not even of Malis. Just praise poured like syrup over a lie she'd crafted and served to her loyal circle. I felt heat rush to my ears. My hands curled around the edge of the laundry basket. Every part of that room had come from my pocket, my hours, my sweat, and now she was parading it like a charity project she graciously funded. I walked down the hall to Malis's room and knocked lightly. She called for me to come in, and I sat on the edge of her bed without a word, just handed her the phone. She stared at the image for a long time, then slowly handed it back. "She never even walked into that room," she said, voice flat. "She didn't have to," I replied. "She probably sent someone by to take the picture when we weren't home." Malis rubbed her stomach gently. "She's not going to stop, is she?" I shook my head. "No. But I am." That night, after Malis fell asleep, I sat alone in the living room scrolling through everything Seraphine had posted the past few days. All perfectly curated, nothing overt. Just enough breadcrumbs to shape the narrative she wanted, that she was the guiding force, the martyr mother who, despite being betrayed by her daughters, still rose above to do the right thing. I put the phone down, got a glass of water, and sat in the dark for a while. And then it came. As I was placing the glass in the sink, my phone lit up again. This time, it was Alden. His first message in months. "Is the baby okay? We're updating the family tree." Not "how are you" or "I miss you." Not even "hope everything's all right." Just a sentence. Blunt, transactional, and shamelessly cold. As if the child's existence was nothing more than a bullet point to be filed in the next holiday newsletter. I didn't answer right away. I just stood there, staring at it. That was Alden. Always watching from a distance. Always more concerned with perception than connection. He didn't come to the hospital to sit by Malis's side. He came to drop off a folder and deliver judgment like a priest without confession. Now he wanted a name for a spreadsheet. I sat down at the dining table, opened my laptop, and began a new document. A list. At the top, I typed, "Everything I will no longer tolerate." Under it, I wrote, "People stealing credit for things they didn't earn. People rewriting my story like I wasn't in the room when it happened. People who call once every few months and expect me to fill in the blanks for them. Family who treat lineage like currency. Anyone who thinks silence is the same thing as grace." I hit save and closed the lid. Then I opened a new browser tab and started looking at rental listings in Atlanta. A few clicks turned into a few calls. By midnight, I had 2 appointments set for the following week. I didn't tell anyone, not even Malis, not because I didn't trust her, but because I needed her to feel safe, to know she had a future without also having to carry the weight of escaping the past. If she asked, I'd tell her. But for now, I just needed to move pieces quietly. The next day, I packed away some baby clothes and a few of my grandmother's keepsakes. I told Malis I was organizing. She didn't question it, and when I had a moment alone in the nursery, I stood in the center of the room, that same space Seraphine had posted like a trophy, and looked around. I touched the rocking chair I'd assembled myself, the books I'd shelved alphabetically, the mobile I'd ordered off Etsy. Then I pulled out my phone and drafted a reply to Alden's message. I typed, "She's perfect, and she'll be starting her life in a place you've never seen, with a name you'll never share." But I didn't hit send. Not yet. I just stared at it, let it sit there on the screen like a gate waiting to be closed for good. Outside, the sky was starting to fade into pink. Malis was humming in her room. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang out, marking the hour. I closed the message, but not before hitting save. The day was coming. The confrontation, the break, the final cut. But not yet. First, we'd get out. Then, we'd reclaim the story. I hovered over the send button longer than I should have. The sentence was still sitting there, glowing faintly in the low light of my apartment, as if even the phone knew this message carried weight. Not just because of the words, sharp and final, but because of what it meant. The reply wasn't just a statement, it was closure. It was the last brick in a wall I'd spent years denying I needed to build. "She's perfect. She's starting school next year in a city you've never been to, with a last name you'll never share." I reread it once more, every syllable like a tiny knife meant to cut through decades of expectation, guilt, and family performance. And then I hit send. I imagined Alden sitting at his desk, probably polishing his old cufflinks or reading financial news, then casually opening that message expecting a polite update, something to paste into his next holiday letter between a stock market update and the latest golf score. Instead, he'd get that. Let him chew on it. That was Monday evening. By Tuesday morning, I had the moving truck booked, mail forwarding forms submitted, and a short-term rental in Atlanta secured under my name. I made sure to tell only one person, Avon. She didn't ask why. She just nodded and offered to drive the truck if I needed. "You two don't owe this city a single thing," she said, handing me a second cup of coffee. Sometimes freedom looks like cardboard boxes and silence. By Wednesday, I began packing. Quietly, methodically. We worked at night, after Malis had rested, folding clothes, wrapping baby items in bubble wrap, stacking memories into neat little piles that somehow felt lighter than the years they represented. Malis didn't ask where we were going. She didn't need to. She knew. We didn't speak about Charleston in terms of what we'd miss. There wasn't much. A few good memories, a porch swing from childhood, our grandmother's old biscuit recipe, a bookshop tucked behind a coffee shop we'd once visited together. But they were overshadowed by everything else. The judgment, the surveillance, the silence from people who claimed to love you, but only if you followed the script they'd written. Friday morning came soft and gray. The truck pulled up at 8 a.m., and Avon showed up 5 minutes later with croissants, orange juice, and no unnecessary words. Malis was already dressed when I walked into her room. She sat on the edge of the bed, one hand on her belly, the other clutching the heirloom necklace I'd given her. She looked calm in the way people do when they've decided not to look back. "Are we ready?" she asked. "As ready as we'll ever be," I answered. It took 2 hours to load everything. The truck wasn't full, not with material things anyway. We weren't bringing couches or armoires or china sets, just essentials, clothes, keepsakes, things with meaning, not show. Before I closed the door to the apartment for the last time, I stood in the center of the living room. The place still held echoes. Malis crying in the middle of the night, the smell of tea and lavender, the soft creak of floorboards where we danced once just to make the baby kick. It hadn't been perfect, but it had been safe. And that mattered. I didn't leave a note. I didn't owe anyone one. By noon, we were crossing the Arthur Ravenel Jr. Bridge, Charleston's skyline shrinking in the rearview mirror. The clouds parted just slightly, and sunlight cracked through, lighting up the water below. Malis sat quietly beside me, one hand resting on her belly, her eyes scanning the horizon. "You think they'll try to find us?" she asked eventually. I kept my eyes on the road. "Not where we're going," I said. There was a pause, then she nodded, slow and sure. We drove in silence for a while longer, the kind that didn't need filling. Just us, the road, and the hum of a future slowly taking shape. Hours later, we pulled into the driveway of a small duplex in a quiet Atlanta neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but clean, bright, with a fenced yard and 2 bedrooms that felt like possibility more than walls. Avon helped unload, then hugged us both, leaving behind a set of spare keys and a grocery gift card. "Welcome home," she said, then drove off without fanfare. That evening, after we'd assembled the crib and set up the essentials, Malis stood in the doorway of her new room. She looked around, the soft green curtains, the rocking chair, the mobile, and whispered, "This one feels like it was always meant to be hers." I knew who she meant. I nodded and squeezed her hand. "This one belongs to no one but us." That night, I lay in my new bed, the window cracked open to let in the Georgia breeze. The phone buzzed once. I picked it up. It was a reply from Alden, just 3 words. "Understood. Good luck." I stared at it, not sure what to feel. No apology, no anger, just that. I deleted it without answering. He didn't need to be part of this story anymore. The road stretched long and quiet ahead of us, and for once, I didn't feel the need to look back. 2 years later, we'd planted roots in a city where no one whispered about us at church luncheons, where no one eyed Malis's belly like a mark of shame. Atlanta gave us anonymity first, then opportunity. And eventually, something we hadn't had in Charleston in a long time: ease. Our apartment wasn't glamorous. It sat above a hardware store, its windows creaked when the wind blew too hard, and the paint in the hallway always seemed to be one coat short of done. But it was ours. The lease had my name on it, the bills came in our mailbox, and when you walked in, the air smelled like rosemary and lavender. 2 cents Malis swore calmed the baby. We cooked most nights. We argued over where to put the dish rack. We figured it out, one day at a time. And somewhere in the middle of those days, we grew into ourselves. Malis enrolled in community college the fall after we moved. She worked part-time at a clothing boutique off Peachtree Street and took night classes. She'd come home with textbooks, blisters, and stories. I watched her juggle motherhood, study for exams, and still find time to bake muffins on weekends because the baby likes blueberry. And the baby, her name is Grace, became the glue between everything we thought had broken. She had Malis's eyes and my stubbornness. She walked at 9 months, insisted on dressing herself by 15, and refused to nap without a specific blanket that had once been mine as a child. Every milestone felt like a small revolution, not just because she was growing, but because every smile, every giggle, was proof that we'd survived. That spring, on Grace's 2nd birthday, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I sent a text. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't bitter. Just a photo of Grace in a yellow dress, frosting on her cheeks, blowing out candles while Malis held her from behind. Underneath, I typed, "She's loved, safe, and happy. That's all you need to know." I sent it to both Seraphine and Alden. No response came back. I hadn't expected one, but I needed to send it. Not for closure, but for clarity. Let them know they had missed something extraordinary, and that she was thriving in a world they had no control over. Weeks passed, and then we heard the news. Apparently, someone in Charleston had finally gotten tired of the Kincaid myth. A woman from Seraphine's old charity circle, the kind who always dressed like she was going to a magazine shoot but never missed an opportunity for gossip, had spilled. Maybe she'd seen through the performance, or maybe she'd just been cut from the Christmas card list one too many times. Either way, the truth came out. About the night Malis was thrown out, about the torn photo, about the lies posted online about family unity. It spread like wildfire in the quiet corners of Charleston, where judgment hid behind etiquette. Avon heard it first, through a mutual friend. She called, barely able to keep the smile out of her voice. "They're being left off guest lists," she told me. "Seraphine got uninvited from the country club gala. Alden's been radio silent at his golf club. Word is, everyone's acting like they didn't know." I didn't laugh. But I did breathe a little easier. It wasn't revenge. It was reckoning. And that summer, as Grace toddled between my legs in the kitchen and Malis sat at the counter, reading her final term paper aloud, I realized something. We weren't hiding anymore. We weren't healing anymore either. We were just living. That fall, Malis graduated with honors. She wore a navy blue dress under her gown, the same one she'd worn to her first interview in Atlanta. I stood in the audience holding Grace, who clapped when her mom's name was called, as if she understood what the moment meant. 3 months later, Malis opened her own boutique. It wasn't flashy, but it was full of light. The walls were pale green, the racks clean and curated, the space filled with pieces from local designers. It was a place where she got to decide the narrative, what went on display, what was worth keeping, and what didn't belong anymore. On the day of the grand opening, people trickled in slowly, friends from her classes, neighbors from the block, the woman who sold us fresh flowers every week for our window display. And above the entrance, painted on a wooden sign Malis had made by hand, were the words, "Family is who shows up." She didn't say much about it, just looked at me when I saw it, and smiled. "I meant it," she said. I squeezed her hand. "I know." As the store buzzed with voices and soft jazz in the background, Avon slipped in with a bouquet and a bag of pastries. She handed me a croissant, then leaned in close. "You think they'll ever walk through that door?" she asked, her eyes darting toward the front entrance. I looked out past the glass, at the people laughing, shopping, walking dogs, at Grace sitting behind the counter with a coloring book and a juice box, and I smiled. "If they do," I said, "they'll know exactly where they stand. Sometimes, family isn't who shares your blood, it's who stands beside you when everyone else walks away." This story wasn't just about betrayal, it was about choosing love over legacy, truth over appearances, and learning that silence can be more powerful than shouting. Have you ever had to choose between what's right and what's expected? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. And if this hit home, don't forget to subscribe. There's more where this came from.